Hello and welcome to Colin Bradley Artcast. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
Oh, we're back!
Isn't it nice, Steve? Hey, very familiar territory.
We're back, everyone. We're sort of springing it on you as well by doing it live on YouTube. But if you're listening on iTunes, then welcome back. We're glad to have you back listening. I know that we've had a lot of requests for our podcast to come back.
We have, and we felt a bit guilty about it, haven't we?
Yeah.
So you've made us feel guilty, folks.
I know. That's not the only reason why we're bringing it back, obviously. We're going to bring it back on a bi-weekly basis rather than the weekly basis that we used to do, just because time. And that's the reason why we stopped it, because we didn't have enough time to record and edit and publish on a weekly basis. But now we've got this fantastic live setup that we're able to do with YouTube, and we've trialed with the feedback show. We thought, yeah, we can bring this back just on a bi-weekly basis. And it's good to be back, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I've missed it too. I know the listeners have missed it, but we have, or I have.
Yeah.
It brightened my week up too.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to everyone, even though it's sort of a one-way conversation. It's nice to communicate with everyone. And we do it on the feedback show anyway, but it's nice to talk a bit more relaxed without talking about
I think too, Steve, we've got a couple of questions I know we're going to be dealing with, but now people know we're back. I'm sure that they will come up with a lot of ideas that we can use and put forward and talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's time now. We're live, so we can actually take questions on the show. So if anyone can tune in live, then they can post comments into the show, and when we're live, and we can actually answer them live. So it's going to be a nice sort of, if people are able to tune in live, it's going to be nice to get that interaction sort of less one way than it was before.
How are they going to know about it, though, Steve? I mean, they didn't know about this or don't know about this. So
no.
How are you going to arrange it?
Yeah, well, because with time and things, we can't unfortunately say when it's going to be a set time each week, because that's just going to be like impossible to guess. But what we can do is give you a bit more notice than we did this one. So I can post a message out on the Facebook page. It will go out on Twitter anyway when we're live. And if people are subscribed to our YouTube channel, then they can get a notification as soon as we're live, so they can jump on. So
that's a good idea.
Yeah, so it's going to obviously be a bit tricky for people to tune in every week, because they're not going to know exactly when. But obviously, it will always be available as a replay and on YouTube, and it will always be available on our iTunes feed. So if people because people liked the weekly, now it's bi-weekly, but they liked the weekly download from their iTunes. So they'll still get that. But if you're able to tune in when we go live, then come join us.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So we've got a few people tuning in that have managed to catch us last minute. So welcome. Should we talk about what we've been doing the last?
I think that's a great
6
idea.
months.
Put them in the picture, Steve.
Yeah, because we did a Christmas show, didn't we?
That's right.
Christmas special, because we ended it in October and then came back for Christmas, which was fun. And we had a lot to talk about then. So what have you been up to in the last 6 months?
Gosh, wow. Well, I've been pretty busy, as you can imagine, as you know, because of all the projects I'm building up for you. My ideas really were, I think I mentioned it on the Christmas show, that what I was going to do is to add more colour to the pictures. And I've certainly done that. People would have already seen that, the Indian chief and the portrait that I did, and the new landscape that we put out recently of Ainsford. Well, there's more of those. There's quite a few more coming up that's similar line, but I did push the boat out even further then, with not just colour but impressionistic pictures too. So I've kind of been working hard at finding new ways to use not only the pencil, but the color shapers too. We've now got quite a few now. We've got 5 altogether, and I'm using them much more. And the Schnauzer that's just come out on the members site and the clip on YouTube, with that one, I use I don't know whether it was the first one I did, that I started using the color shaper more like a paintbrush.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I found that not just really therapeutic, because it's like taking me back to my watercolor days when I was painting, but it gives an added dimension to the pencils. You couldn't do without the pencil, but now I've got to say you can't really do without the color shaper. Not if you want to produce the kind of work that I've been doing. So that's really, over the last 6 months, I would say that's the biggest single thing that I've found not only really enjoyable to work with, but very, very useful as an additional tool to bring more depth. I think that's what it was doing. You know, if everybody knows when you use a normal colored pencil, it kind of goes a bit flat. You can't really get that dimension that you can with paint, particularly oil paint. If we're comparing this with an oil painting, you get a tremendous depth with oil because you can build it up, for one thing, color on color on color, and you can also put light on dark with oil, where it's difficult with the pastel pencil unless you know what you're doing. But with the color shaper, you're kind of revisiting that kind of idea. I hope I'm not getting too involved in this, but this is how it's striking me now as I'm doing more and more work. So over the last year, since I've really been using the color shapers big time, I would say that it's changed the face of the pastel pencil. I would hate to do without them now.
Yeah, I noticed on that miniature Schnauzer picture that there was one of the, well, it was loads of clips, but the one clip I noticed on was you turned it round and you could see all the color on that side, and you flicked it back to use that side on the picture. So it's not like you were blending, wiping it off, blending, wiping off. You're like blending it and then just looking at the color on the shaper and then carrying on using that back in on the picture.
That's right.
Really interesting.
Yeah, well, also, you see, when you're doing that, you'll find, and the more you see me using this system, you realize that I work from beginning to end with very, very little backtracking. What you're doing is you're building the picture up slowly, with a very deliberate action, but you're not backtracking, you're not having to alter something. I mean, occasionally I do, I know, but most of the time it's building to a means to an end kind of thing. What I'm doing is building it up so that when you see the finished picture, you think, my goodness me, how on earth do you get to that state? When you first start using the pencil, especially when you put the base colors on, you kind of think, how, if you were looking at the reference picture, for instance, and you were using these base colors, how on earth do you end up with that finished result? And it's not until you see the process that will not only surprise you and amaze you, but you'll understand how it happens. And this is the great thing with the pastel pencil. The techniques are very doable, even with an amateur. You know, they can do that, and we've seen it. The other thing that I found really useful too is using the darker colors, particularly onto the lighter colors, using the darker colors as a palette. And I did it with the Schnauzer, and I've done it since then. In other words, if I've got some dark color and I want to put that dark color into the light, rather than putting the dark colors on the lighter colours, I can then use and dip in to that dark colour with either the ivory or the grey colour shaper, and use it and touch it in, and then touch a little bit of colour into the.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It is like a paintbrush, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Except your palette is there already for you. And I'm working on that more, and people over the next 6 months will see that in more and more and more and more. And
See,
I love it. I absolutely love it. I loved watercolor when I did it, but I'm loving this much more than I did the watercolor, because I've got much more control.
but yeah, I mean, is that so? See, now you've been able to do that. You're doing that intentionally now within your pictures, to be like, okay, there's some color here that I can put into here, but very subtly, because the color shaper doesn't. You don't have the pressure that you would have if you were applying it with a pencil.
That's right. Absolutely. It's very smooth. And that's the other thing about the pastel paper. I know we've had a lot of emails saying they can't get the tooth. They can't cover the tooth up. And we've covered those in the feedback show. But this is where, when you put the darker colors onto your base colors, you tend to see those lines, those tooth marks. And it is sometimes hard to do. Now, the color shaper changed all that. It allowed you then to lose that tooth effect, but still have the tooth as the creative part of that. Do you see what I mean? I love the tooth because it gives me a grip and a three-dimensional look anyway. And when you've got the added addition of being able to work the color shaper in the way that we do by blending those colors into it, then you've got the ultimate. When I say the ultimate, that's probably wrong to say that, because I'm learning every picture I do, I'm learning something new. And if you think of the thousands that I've done, and I learn something new every time, go forward another 2 or 3 years, what are we going to be producing then?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a limit. And I was thinking this morning that if somebody asks me, what subject is taboo with the pastel pencil? What subject can't you do? Nothing. There isn't anything you can't do with the pastel pencil.
Yeah.
What a statement to make. You can't make that statement with anything else. It's
No.
It's absolutely, and I'm always amazed that it hasn't taken off more than it actually has. When I first started 30 years ago with the pastel pencil, I thought that in 20 years, this is going to be the thing. It's going to be taking over the art world. And it hasn't. It definitely hasn't, because we don't get so many people now say to, oh, pastel pencil, what's that then? Mainly because I don't do the shows now that I used to do, because I used to meet the public and say, what were you using? Is that a crayon?
Yeah.
A lot of people now know what pastel pencils are, so I suppose we've achieved that.
They do, yeah, and we've got the internet now, so there's a lot of people able to discover them for themselves on the internet. Just want to go back to you saying about the tooth of the paper with the color shaper and pushing the color into the tooth. I really want to highlight that as a really good tip, is to fill the tooth using the color shaper when you're building up colors. Is easier to cover all of the tooth because without crushing the paper, because the color shaper is softer than a pencil.
That's right.
So you can fill the tooth without crushing the paper. Yeah.
Another innovation that people haven't seen yet, Steve, is, and they will do eventually, is when, I've said to you in the past that it's difficult when you've got a landscape, for instance, you're doing a sky and you want to do a dark tree, say, over the top of that sky and leave some light coming through, which you do want to do that. And I've always said in the past, this is difficult. If I was going to see one thing that might be a problem, that would be it. When you put foliage on top of a light sky, because the color underneath is usually white or ivory or gray or mixtures of all of them. And those colors don't dry out. Therefore, when you put the greens or the ochres, whatever color you're going to put on top of them, then those colors then are affected by the color underneath. So what you've done, and typical of that is my clip on YouTube, which is far outstripping every other one. 100 and something thousand now we've got views on that with the tree detail. I leave the pastel paper, or I erase the color. Well, there is a new way that I've recently found of doing that. Rather than when you put the sky on, for instance, you go around the tree area without actually putting the pastel onto the tree. But what you can do then is you can rub, instead of using your pencil to put the color shaper, you can rub the sky area around it and rub it across the tree. Now, you don't get as a stronger color. In other words, the white or the grey, whatever, you won't be as strong as it was in the sky that hadn't had any colour on it. But it's enough to give you the appearance behind the tree, if you get what I mean. When you're putting the colour on and the foliage on, you can still see behind. And it has changed some of the ways that I've been producing trees. All this is coming up. So you'll be seeing all these folks, these different techniques. But this is just one thing, you see, where people say, you've very kindly taken on board, which I'm sure you're going to talk about later, most of the work now. So my job now is solely to find all of these new ideas, which is great because I love doing it anyway. And this is one of them. This is one of those new ideas that have come from practice and working and being able to concentrate on my job.
So what you're able to do, just going back to the trees and that light pastel, is that you're putting a very, very sort of light layer of pastel that's going to be sitting behind all the darker colors, but because you're using your sort of finger or you're just pushing the color across the paper, it's creating a very, very light layer, nothing that's going to affect as much the colors going on top of it.
Yes, and the other bonus you've got to that, which I'm sure people appreciate, is you're not crushing the paper.
Yes, just by dragging your finger across.
That's right. So so when you go to put the stronger colors on, the paper is virtually pristine.
Yeah.
So it hasn't got any, you haven't had to rub with the colors or the pencil colors in. So it's a real good bonus. And anyway, you can try it, folks. I showed you how to do it now. You can have a crack at it. But you do have to be a little bit mindful there that you don't leave a trace element like a halo around the tree. That's the risk involved in this. You see what I mean? Because you're not going to put the color of the pencil directly onto that area. You're just going to use it. But with a little practice, with a little, you would be able to do that. So it's certainly a great idea.
So there's two techniques there really you spoke about there, two things that you've sort of approached differently recently, and that's a way of getting the pastel on the paper without crushing it.
That's right.
To give you the different effects. There's both those using the color shapers to push the color in, and also dragging your finger very lightly across to bring a very thin layer of pastel behind the tree.
In the old days, Steve, before the advent of the color shaper, if I was doing a black section of an animal, say, I would start with the mid-grey, then I would use, say, a Payne's grey, then I would use another color. This could be 169, it could be brown, it could be blue, depending on the tone we're wanting. Then after that, I would then put the black on. Now, this is without color shaping, color shapers, right? And then the only way I could get that really to work very well is to put back the mid-grey, which was the softer of the colors we used, back on top of it. Okay, and that would have rubbed that color into the pastel paper. And I did this for many, many, many years. Now, every application of pencil crushes the paper just a tiny bit more. You with me? Now, what we do now is we put the grey on, and I tell people to, without crushing the paper, cover as much as you can. Then we put another colour on, and again, it would be, say, it would be Payne's grey. Then we rub it with the pastel, the colour shaper. That pushes that colour into the paper. That means the subsequent colours that go on top of it are fresher.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So you haven't crushed the paper. And I do mention this many, many times, and you'll hear me mention it a lot more times because it's quite important. So you get, again, another technique which the colour shaper has really changed the way we think.
Mm. Fantastic. Yeah, really interesting. I'm finding it really interesting, and I'm sure everyone listening is going to be looking forward to seeing these new techniques applied more and more over the coming pictures. And we've got quite a lot that are ready to come out, and we've been publishing a lot more recently, almost once a week, just because there's so many that you're doing.
I know, I'm churning them out.
Yeah, and so there's a lot more variety that I think we've ever done on the membership site that we've ever had. So
that's enough about me, Steve. What about you?
Yeah, the last 6 months have been crazy for me.
It has, hasn't it?
I decided this year, after doing Panto at Christmas, to take a sort of step back from the acting just for this year, because there was a lot of things going on with work and business and our business that I wanted to focus on. And don't get me wrong, the acting work is fantastic, and I'll always love it, and it'll always be there for me to do. Fingers crossed. But it's a long time to sort of be taken away from work sometimes. You know, it could be up to 7 weeks of rehearsals and shows and things like that. And even though I can work alongside it, it puts just a lot of pressure and a bit of stress really on the other things. So I thought I'd take a year to get everything sorted, because with certainly our business, there's been a lot of changes with the company growing, and me taking the director's role, sort of the head of the company now, managing all the inquiries and dealing with the orders and the accounts and everything like that, so that it completely gives you the freedom to do the artwork and the filming, which I think has worked out really well. I mean, I love the business. I love what we do. And technically I've been helping you since I was 15. So
that's right.
I've been involved in what you do for a long time. So it's really lovely to be technically the director and be the head of the company. It's fantastic. And that's probably why we've been able to push out a lot more projects, is because you've had the freedom of not having to deal with all the customer inquiries, for being able to just think about your artwork, which is great, really, and it's worked out for the best, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It was perfect, and your knowledge of computers is vast, and I'm sure people out there realise just how good you are, having produced the fantastic website we have and all of the other things. And we've got some lots and lots of exciting things to come in the next 6 months or so that people are it's going to blow their mind. And it couldn't have been done at all without you, and it couldn't have been done without your expertise. And I wanted to express it. I've expressed it to you so many times before, but I'm sure others would agree with me on that. The response rate, if you've got a query, folks, the response rate is fantastic. Steve's there on the ball, and we don't get many firms that can do that. If we do have a little hiccup somewhere, like we did have a little while ago when the old site went down, you won't, folks. You'll never be able to appreciate just what went through Steve's and my mind at that time when we suddenly didn't have a site anymore.
I know. Oh my goodness.
But again, it's down to you. You backed it up. You did all the right things, and you sorted it all out, which was absolutely amazing. It could have been a disaster for us as well as all the listeners out there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It was very, very stressful. Well, I say it was stressful. It was stressful for a short moment, but I'm usually quite cool at keeping my calm in those
Just as well you are, because I wasn't.
in those situations. You just crack on, and fortunately, within a couple of days, we'd had the site back and on a new domain, colinbradleyart.com, which I've wanted to do for a long time, to move us to a .com. So that was a good opportune moment, and always a silver lining. Always a silver lining.
That's right.
Those things.
Well, you've always looked at it that way. We brought you up, all the children, that way. There's always a reason for these things happening, and that was one. It's come back better than ever.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many things behind the scenes that I've been able to implement that has hopefully improved the website and the speed of the site and all sorts of things. So yeah, there's been a lot.
I'll also mention, Stephen, that anybody that's seen The Hollow Crown recently, it was on BBC Two in the UK, and it's probably going to be worldwide, I imagine, in time, would have seen you. Now, they might not have realised that they'd seen you, but they did.
Yeah,
you were in about 8 or 9 different shots as a soldier. And
yeah,
one of my favourite shots was when you were charging you were on what's the chap's name?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
That's him.
Yeah, playing Richard,
side, weren't you?
Yeah,
and you were one of his soldiers. And my goodness, I've got a picture which I'm definitely going to frame at some time with you, charging with your sword right at the camera, with a poor chap alongside you with an arrow stuck in his chest.
I was lucky. I didn't get any arrows in the chest.
Did you? No, you escaped.
I like to think that I survived. Unlike Mr. Cumberbatch, yeah.
It was great, though. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing, but even we had to keep stopping it all. It was amazing to go through, but we found them all.
Yeah, it was. I put a selection of photos up on Facebook, on my personal Facebook account, and just said, spot the Steve, because it's just, there's so many people in the shot. It's just to find out which one's me.
Still, you had a good time, and it's just. But at least you can say people saw you on television, but they didn't realise it was.
Yeah.
Flick, flick, flick.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a long time ago. People listening to the podcast will remember.
Yeah,
I mentioned that it was a good 18 months to 2 years ago that we filmed that, and it's only just come out. But oh my goodness, yeah, that was so much fun. I long days. I mean, behind the scenes, I was up at 4 a.m. Traveling to set and back at 8 p.m. And it just goes to show that I have so much appreciation for film actors and screen TV actors, because they are long, hard days.
Yeah.
And it was hard work, but yeah, a lot of fun. Nothing like that coming up, unfortunately. If you're out there wanting to see more flickers of Steve on the screen, there isn't any. I haven't shot any more.
I think it's been there, done that job, isn't it?
I think you do one of those because you're an extra. Really, you're not in the. You haven't got any dialogue or anything other than lots of screaming, and. I had a lot of fun. It was good, but it was one of those one-off experiences. I think maybe next time I'll be in Benedict Cumberbatch's role. Maybe. I wish. Anyway, I've got a couple of questions that we have had come through, so I want to just talk about those on the podcast as we've got the time. The first one comes from Ricky. Ricky says, "Hi, Colin. When I look back at my first pictures, I can see so much wrong with them, and I feel like altering and redoing them. Is this just peculiar to me, or do all artists do this? I've been told to leave them alone. What do you think?" Thank you, Ricky.
Yes, that's a very good question, and it's come up many, many times in my career as an art tutor. I remember one time one of my class came up to me and she'd framed this picture, and it'd been on a wall for quite some time. I think it was a couple of years it had been on a wall. And she said to me, I've been looking at that picture and I really don't like the way I did this, that and the other. What do you think, Colin? Do you think I could, or you could deframe it for me and I could work on it again? I said, don't do that. Don't do that. What you've done in the past, you were pleased with. Leave it at that, because if you start fiddling around, you change what you originally did. And it's nice to look back on things. I still do. I've still got some of my original pictures. You're not going to ever see them, folks, but I've got them. And gosh, the naivety when I look at them, but I wouldn't touch them. I could, couldn't I? I could bring them right up to date, but I don't want to, because at that particular time, I was really pleased with what I'd done. And it gives you also a yardstick. It's a way of putting things alongside. You could put an old picture alongside a new one and say, gosh, look how I've improved. So my advice to Ricky is don't touch them at all. No, I wouldn't do them. I can understand the temptation of it, but I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I hope that helps, because it's something I felt strongly about for quite some time.
No, it is good advice. I do agree with you entirely. I can see the temptation, but yeah, it would be a bad idea. I think you'd regret it.
Yes, absolutely. You would do. You would regret that. You say, "Oh, I wonder what I was like." Well, that's what you were like.
Use them as markers to show how far you've come.
Absolutely, yeah. I used to say when I was teaching, I used to say, when you've got your first picture, keep it, because 10 pictures down the line, you can look back on that picture and compare it. And then you could look and think, well, I wonder what my 20th picture will be like, and then do the same thing. And then my 50th picture, then my 100th picture, then my 1000th picture. You can go on like that, but all the while you've got one picture or a stream of pictures that take you, that you had when you started out. That way you give yourself the progression that you've done and where you've made those leaps. And I used to say that, and a lot of people, I did it myself and still do. Very important to do that, because you know how far you'll come. But always look to the next picture as being some new challenge, something you're going to be learn a little bit more from and make a slightly better job of. That's one of the things Pastel Pencil does. Every picture you do is a slight improvement, because you're learning all the time.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks, Ricky, for the question. The next one comes from Uyi. I think that's how you say it. U-Y-I. Uyi Samuel from YouTube. Hello. How can these shapers be used for all colours? Now, I think she's talking about the colour shapers. Yes. How can these shapers be used for all colours? We've kind of sort of spoke about colour shapers anyway, and perhaps
I think what it is meant is, when you see me using it on a black animal, how can you then use that same color shaper on a white animal? Well, you just simply take. They do say on the instructions you can wash these off. I don't do that, and people know that, because if they watch me, they see me rub it in my finger, and you can take the color off. I haven't washed one of those since I started, Steve.
Well, it's rubber, isn't it? It's rubber.
It is. It's a lovely, lovely material. Fantastic. And you tend to, when you take it off with your finger, I think also, you tend to put a little bit of oil from your finger back into the color shaper, making it even smoother.
Yeah, it's true.
That's how I found. So the answer is to clean them off with your fingers, between finger and thumb, until you lose all of the color, and then you put it onto your next color. So that's how I transfer one to another.
Yeah, good. Oh, thanks for that question. All right, I think we'll leave it there for this episode of the podcast, our welcome back episode. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another show. So look out, subscribe to the YouTube channel, look out on Facebook, send us your questions via email or through the website. All the details are on there. Also, comment on this video if you're watching the replay. If you have any questions, we'll pick them all up and put them into the next show.
That's an advantage, really, isn't it, Steve? That people can comment and we can pick up the comments.
Yeah,
I've
indeed.
just seen that at YouTube. Yeah.
All right. There's some banging going on next door now, so I'm going to end the show here. And that's it for this week. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I'm Stephen Bradley.
And I'm Colin Bradley.
Enjoy your week.